Welcome to People. I'm Micah Mater. Let's get started. The United States of America has a new commander-in-chief. Joseph Robinette Biden, the 46th president of the United States, was inaugurated this week. Here to talk about the challenges already ahead of him and his history-making vice president, Kamala Harris, is WGN political analyst Paul Lisnek. Hi, Paul. Thanks for joining us.
Okay. Micah, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's just jump right in. We know that one of the biggest challenges in front of this administration is the pandemic. On Thursday, he revealed his strategic plan to get rid of COVID. But what are some other big challenges ahead for him?
Well, first of all, let me just address COVID for a moment, because it's a comprehensive plan coming from them. And one of the things the Biden administration told us as well on Thursday was that they found no plan from the Trump administration that had been employed that they could follow up on. So this was the Biden administration having to literally create things from scratch. The second piece of that is that there's a significant cost to what he's about to do. It's going to come to about $1.9 trillion. And he's going to be meeting with the leaders of all the houses and of all the aspects of the government, and basically Republicans and Democrats, and try and get them to work together. That's what Biden is known for doing. So that'll be the COVID effort that he's going to be making. You're right, he's got other agenda items. And specifically, I think we've seen it already just in the executive orders he's been doing. Immigration is critical to him. Our relationships in the global world by rejoining the World Health Organization, the Paris Climate Accord. He's moving very quickly. No president in the past has ever signed as many executive orders this quickly as President Biden is doing.
You know, the economy is another big one. If you might remember, he and President Obama worked together to try to ease the recession when they became president and vice president. It's a similar situation for him right now. The pandemic caused all sorts of problems with our economy. Do you think that he should go at it pretty much the same way he did when he was vice president, or should he come up with a new plan?
I think, Mike, it's a different situation because, as you say, there is the pandemic going on. So, it's probably the reason that we have this bad economy, which is how the pandemic was created. So the good news for I think, the Biden administration is that the issues go hand in hand, which means while he's trying to put this plan together and get Congress to work on it to address the COVID pandemic, it's also an economic plan. They work together. He's not trying to create jobs that aren't related to COVID or make things happen. Obviously, the economic plan is going to have to be much more expansive and extensive as time goes on. But as President Biden has said, you can't tackle the economy until you first tackle COVID. And that's the approach he's taking.
This was a very historic inauguration, as you know, with Kamala Harris becoming the first woman of color to be elected vice president, also the first woman in general. What are your thoughts on this, and what should Biden do? Should he rely a lot on Vice President Harris, or he was the last one in the room, as we all know, with President Obama? Should he do the same with Kamala Harris?
Well, he not only should, he's going to, and he's told her that. And so here's what I think is important about that relationship. When Obama picked Biden as his vice president, it was because President Obama at the time was, for the presidency, not very seasoned. He hadn't been a U.S. senator all that long. So he picks as his partner the most seasoned veteran in the Senate to guide him on the very tough issues. Because, of course, as president, you don't know what disaster or what challenge is going to happen from day to day. Well, now that seasoned guy who offered his advice to President Obama and was the last voice in the room, which, by the way, was Biden's requirement to Obama, I think he now appreciates that role. And so he has told Kamala Harris that she, as vice president, will be the last voice in the room. But I think what's going to happen is, if Vice President Harris is, playing it right, she's going to be watching him, get guidance from him. Let's be honest, she wants to be president one day. That's no surprise. She's already run for it. So I think she would be well advised to follow how he works with opposite parties, how he tries to unite, how he tries to compromise. Let that be part of her style. And when she does run for president one day, don't be surprised to hear a lot of stories of the guidance and education she got from President Biden.
And by the mere fact that he did ask her to be his vice president, what does that mean as far as race relations are concerned here in the United States?
Well, he didn't win because he was selecting her. He didn't win the nomination because he selected her, because that nomination came afterwards. The fact that he won the election with over 7 million votes more than President Trump shows that this country indeed was ready for a female of color to assume that role. Listen, Hillary Clinton tried to be that person to get the presidency 4 years ago. The country wasn't ready for it, or at least wasn't ready for her. But Kamala Harris, in the slightly lesser role of vice president, we find out that the country is comfortable with that. Race relations is also one of the issues. We talk about Biden's agenda. He's also said racial injustice and inequality is also at the top of the list of what he plans to tackle, and he's already taking steps through executive orders and commissions to make things happen there. Obviously, I think the vice president is going to be given certain areas to look over, as many vice presidents are. And so I think that area, criminal justice, the woman was a prosecutor for much of her career. Don't be surprised if she is given the world of justice, criminal justice reform, and racial injustice as an area to tackle, and gives her a chance to sort of really come through in very important areas.
Real quick, 15 seconds. What is the personality, do you think, of this new administration? It's only been a few days, but what do you think their personality is?
Their personality truly is to cooperate and compromise. They're going to get resistance from Republicans who already went after Rand Paul, who already went after him for his comments in his inaugural address, hearing him attack. It's not Biden's personality. He won't get suckered into it. He'll continue to try and find compromise.
All right. Thank you so much. WGN political analyst Paul Lisnek. Always lovely to get your perspective. Be safe, be well.
You as well, Micah. Thank you.